My name is Hannah Bennett. I'm 38 years old. On the morning I was wheeled into cancer surgery, my parents promised they would stay by my bedside until the very last moment. But while I sat alone in a hospital gown, staring at the waiting room door for hours, they were raising champagne glasses at my younger sister's wedding celebration. 3 months later, those same people showed up at my apartment in tears, begging me to save the family from a secret they had tried so hard to bury. But that happened later. Everything began on a cold morning in Seattle. Hannah Bennett sat by the window of her hospital room on the 8th floor, her hands tightly clasped together. Outside, the sky was covered in a heavy gray blanket of clouds. They hung so low it felt as if they could touch the distant buildings. The surgery had been scheduled weeks earlier. After months of tests, biopsies, and anxious waiting, the doctors had finally decided that treatment could not be delayed any longer. Everyone understood how serious the situation was, at least Hannah thought they did. The night before, her mother had held her for a long time. Susan Bennett cried as she spoke. "You don't have to go through this alone." Her father, Richard Bennett, sat beside them and nodded. "No matter what happens, we'll be there." Those words brought Hannah relief for the first time in weeks. She believed them. Maybe that was her biggest mistake. 6 o'clock in the morning. She called her mother. No answer. 10 minutes later. She called her father. Voicemail. Hannah tried to reassure herself. Maybe they were already on the way. Maybe they were stuck in traffic. Maybe their phones had died. People always find reasons to protect the ones they love. Sometimes even when the truth is standing right in front of them. A nurse named Evelyn stepped in to check her chart. "Is your family coming soon?" Hannah smiled. "They're on the way." The answer sounded natural, but deep inside, a growing sense of unease was beginning to take hold. For months, the entire Bennett family had revolved around one person, Lauren Bennett, Hannah's younger sister. Lauren was 3 years younger than her. Beautiful, outgoing, always the center of attention. Lauren's upcoming wedding had become the most important event in the family. Pictures of wedding dresses, wine tastings, trips to visit venues. Every day there was something new on social media. At times, Hannah felt irritated, but then she blamed herself. Lauren was only getting married once. She didn't want to be the jealous older sister. Until she opened her phone that morning. Just once. Just to pass the time. And then everything changed. The newest post appeared at the top of her screen. Lauren stood in the middle of a sprawling vineyard in Napa Valley. Derek stood beside her. A little farther back were Susan and Richard, all of them smiling, champagne glasses raised high. The scene looked like an advertisement for a perfect life. The caption beneath the photo made Hannah freeze. Celebrating an amazing family weekend before the big day. Family. Interesting. Because at that exact moment, another member of the family was sitting alone in an oncology ward, preparing to undergo surgery. Hannah checked the timestamp. Less than an hour earlier. No traffic. No emergency. No misunderstanding. They had never planned to come. Her hands began to tremble. She sent a text to her mother. "Where are you?" The message was read almost immediately. No reply. Sometimes silence hurts more than a lie. Evelyn returned to the room. One look at Hannah's face was enough for her to know something was wrong. The nurse sat beside her. She didn't ask too many questions. She didn't offer empty cliches. She simply said, very gently, "We're going to take good care of you." Hannah felt a lump rise in her throat. A complete stranger had just shown her more care than her own family. A few minutes later, the medical team began wheeling her bed toward the operating room. The wheels rolled slowly down the long hallway. Bright white lights reflected across the ceiling. Hannah kept looking behind her, still hoping, still waiting. Part of her believed her parents would appear at the last second, that they would come running, that all of this was just a misunderstanding. But the operating room doors slowly closed. No one appeared. No mother, no father, no sister, no family. Just Hannah. And for the first time in her life, she realized a truth that hurt more than the disease inside her body. Some people will always tell you that family is everything, until they are forced to choose. And when that moment came, Hannah Bennett finally learned exactly where she stood in her family. When Hannah Bennett was discharged from the hospital, her apartment looked exactly the same as the day she had left it. No balloons, no flowers, no congratulation cards, no sign that anyone had been worried about her. The key turned softly in the lock. The door opened. The apartment was so quiet she could hear the steady ticking of the wall clock. Hannah set her bag down on a chair and lowered herself carefully into a seat. Every movement sent pain through her body, but the emptiness inside her hurt even more. For the next week, her phone barely rang. Her mother sent a few short messages. "How are you feeling? Make sure you get some rest." No apology, no mention of the surgery, as if it had never happened. Meanwhile, Lauren continued posting wedding updates every single day. Wedding dress fittings, menu tastings, wine selections, photos with friends. Her life moved forward like a perfect movie, while Hannah was learning how to live with pain and new scars. Then one morning, her phone rang. It was the hospital. Hannah assumed it was a routine follow-up call, but the woman on the other end sounded tense. "Miss Bennett, we're calling regarding your treatment payment." Hannah frowned. "What payment?" The woman was silent for a few seconds. Then she answered carefully. "The payment from your medical trust has been declined." Hannah froze. That was impossible. The trust existed for this exact reason. Years earlier, when Eleanor passed away, she had left behind a fund specifically for Hannah's health care. She understood her granddaughter's condition. She understood that one day that money might become her lifeline. Hannah still remembered the last time she saw her grandmother. The elderly woman had taken her hand and said, "If anything ever happens to me, promise me you'll take care of yourself first. Don't sacrifice yourself for anyone." At the time, Hannah thought it was simply grandmotherly advice. Now she found herself wondering whether Eleanor had seen something she never had. The very next day, Hannah contacted the bank. After spending nearly an hour verifying her identity, a representative finally opened the account records. What she heard made her blood run cold. The current balance was far lower than it should have been. Not a few $1,000s, not even tens of thousands. An enormous amount of money was simply gone. Hannah requested the transaction history. Page after page arrived in her email. She opened the file, scrolled down, then stopped. A large withdrawal had been made shortly before her surgery, then another, then another. Every transaction had been properly approved. Hannah felt her stomach tighten. Someone had access. Someone she had trusted completely. She dug deeper into the records. Then the authorized user's name appeared on the screen, Richard Bennett, her father. The room suddenly felt terrifyingly silent. For years, Hannah had never given that detail a second thought. Back when the trust was created, Eleanor wanted someone who could help manage the account if Hannah's health ever deteriorated. The person chosen was her father. It seemed completely reasonable. At least it had back then. Hannah kept reviewing the transactions, every payment, every date, every amount, and gradually a pattern began to emerge. The timing of the withdrawals lined up almost perfectly with Lauren's wedding preparations, venue deposits, vendor payments, event upgrades, large sums of money disappearing one after another. Hannah's heart pounded so hard she pressed a hand against her chest. No, this couldn't be real, but every piece of evidence pointed in the same direction. That afternoon, she called her mother. Susan answered almost immediately. For the first time in weeks, Hannah didn't waste time. "Mom, where did the money from my trust go?" Silence. A long and unusual silence. Not surprise. Not confusion. The silence of someone carefully choosing their words. Finally, Susan spoke. "Lauren just wanted a beautiful wedding." Hannah closed her eyes. In that moment, everything collapsed. No more doubts. No more hope. No more misunderstandings. Her mother knew. Her father knew. And very likely, Lauren knew too. Susan continued explaining. "Your father said we'd put it back. We only borrowed it temporarily." Borrowed. Such a strange word, especially when the owner had never been asked. That night, Hannah sat alone in front of her computer. She reopened every document. This time, she noticed an old file buried near the bottom of the folder. A handwritten letter from Eleanor. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. The ink had faded with time, but one sentence stopped her cold. Some people will love your value more than they love you, and directly beneath that letter was another document, one she had never paid much attention to before. The moment she read what was inside, Hannah realized the entire story had just become much bigger. Because the money spent on Lauren's wedding was not the whole truth. Something else was missing. And this time, it was enough to destroy the entire Bennett family. 3 months later, Hannah Bennett had almost stopped calling her family altogether. At first, the silence felt like a wound, then it became peace. Her body recovered slowly but steadily. Follow-up appointments started bringing good news. Her numbers improved. Her doctors were pleased with the progress of her treatment. For the first time in months, Hannah felt like she could finally look ahead, not because of her family, but despite having a family like that. During that time, Lauren continued planning her wedding exactly as scheduled. Luxurious photos kept appearing across social media. A vineyard stretching beneath the golden sunset, lavish banquet tables, expensive dresses, perfect smiles, a perfect life. At least that was what everyone saw, but photographs never tell the entire truth. One rainy afternoon, Hannah's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. The caller introduced herself as a representative from a financial firm, reviewing records connected to Eleanor Bennett's trust. Hannah listened, and the longer she listened, the colder her expression became. An internal review had been opened. The source of funds used in several major transactions was being questioned. Certain payments related to Lauren's wedding had been flagged. Some documents did not match. Some signatures appeared incomplete. The call lasted only a few minutes, but Hannah understood exactly what it meant. The truth was finally beginning to catch up with the people who created it. 2 days later, there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, Hannah barely recognized her parents. Susan Bennett looked years older. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her face was filled with worry. Richard Bennett stood behind her, holding a thick stack of documents. He had never looked so exhausted. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The air between them felt as heavy as stone. Finally, Susan broke down in tears. "Hannah, please, just 2 words." But Hannah immediately knew they were not there because of her health. If they truly cared, they would have come months ago. Richard handed over the stack of papers. Inside were dozens of documents, requests for explanations, review notices, financial verification forms, legal terminology Hannah had never seen before. But one glance was enough. The investigation was growing, and her family was terrified. Susan sat down. Her hands trembled. "You have to help Lauren." Hannah remained silent. Her mother continued. "If this keeps going, everything will fall apart. The house, the wedding, your sister's reputation." Hannah almost laughed. It was strange. The day she entered surgery, nobody said Hannah needed saving. Nobody worried about her future. Nobody thought about her reputation. Yet now, the entire family wanted her to save Lauren's future. Once again, Lauren was still the priority. Richard pulled out a separate document. He slid it across the table toward Hannah. This was the real reason they had come. A gift declaration. If Hannah signed it, every dollar would be considered a voluntary gift. All legal concerns would disappear. The investigation would end. Lauren would be safe. Hannah stared at the paper. Then she looked at her father. For the first time in months, he couldn't meet her eyes. Maybe because he knew exactly what he had done. Or maybe because he knew every excuse had finally run out. Then, a detail inside the file caught Hannah's attention. One name appeared again and again. Margaret Sullivan, Derek's mother. Lauren's future mother-in-law. Hannah frowned. She had never paid much attention before. But now that name appeared throughout countless transactions. Emails, contracts, payments, even decisions involving expensive wedding upgrades. It seemed Margaret had encouraged Lauren to turn the wedding into a lavish display far beyond what she could realistically afford. The pieces slowly began falling into place. Lauren hadn't simply been spoiled. She had been pulled deeper and deeper into a lifestyle she could never sustain on her own. Susan reached for Hannah's hand. This time, Hannah didn't pull away. She simply looked quietly at her mother. "Please," Susan begged. "Please save your sister." Hannah looked at the face that had once made her feel safe throughout her childhood. But now, all she saw was fear. Not the fear of losing a daughter, the fear of facing consequences. As her parents prepared to leave, Richard stopped at the door and said one final thing. "We're all having dinner together this Sunday. We'll talk about this as a family." Hannah stood in the doorway watching them walk down the stairs. She knew exactly what was waiting for her. It wasn't a family dinner. It was a carefully staged trial designed to make her feel guilty. But what nobody in the Bennett family knew was that Hannah was preparing for that meeting too. And this time, the person carrying the most dangerous secret wouldn't be them. It would be her. On Sunday evening, Hannah Bennett drove to her parents' house. A light rain hung over the Seattle sky. Drops of water slid slowly across the windshield like memories she had spent months trying to forget. But some truths cannot stay buried. Sooner or later, they always find their way back. The moment Hannah stepped into the dining room, she knew she had been right. This had never been a family dinner. It was a coordinated intervention. Lauren was already there. Derek sat beside her. Susan and Richard occupied opposite ends of the table. Even Margaret Sullivan had shown up. A few close relatives were there as well. A perfect audience, a perfect stage, a perfect plan. At least that was what they believed. Lauren spoke first. Her voice was soft. "Hannah, this has gone too far." Hannah pulled out a chair and sat down. She said nothing. Lauren continued. "We're family. We shouldn't be hurting each other like this." It was a beautiful statement. Beautiful enough to almost make Hannah laugh, because the first person who had been hurt in this story was her. Susan started crying. "I haven't slept in weeks. Please help your sister." Richard pushed the gift declaration toward Hannah. "Just sign it. Everything will be over." The room fell silent. Every pair of eyes turned toward Hannah. That was exactly what they wanted. Pressure, guilt, family loyalty, the familiar weapons families often use when logic no longer works. But this time, Hannah had not come empty-handed. She placed a briefcase on the table. Everyone exchanged uneasy glances. Lauren began to look nervous. Hannah opened the case. One folder after another came out. Bank statements, medical records, transaction histories, confirmation letters. She placed them on the table one by one. Nobody spoke. Because evidence creates a very different kind of silence, not embarrassment, not fear. The kind that comes when people realize their lives are about to die. Hannah looked at Lauren, then at her parents. Finally, she spoke. "While I was being wheeled into surgery, all of you were raising glasses and celebrating a wedding. No one argued." She continued, "While doctors were trying to save my life, my treatment fund was being used to pay for a wedding venue." Susan lowered her head. Richard closed his eyes. Lauren started crying, but Hannah wasn't finished. She pulled out Eleanor's letter. The paper was old, its corners worn from time. For years, Hannah believed it was simply a grandmother's message to her granddaughter. But it wasn't. Behind the letter was a legal attachment connected to the trust, a document almost nobody had ever noticed, except Hannah. After spending countless nights reviewing every record, she had found it. The moment Richard saw the document, the color drained from his face. Lauren immediately noticed something was wrong. "Dad, what's happening?" Nobody answered. Hannah slowly looked around the table. Then she spoke. "Grandma saw this coming years ago." The room went still. According to the additional trust provision, anyone who used the funds for purposes unrelated to medical care would be required to repay every dollar, along with personal legal liability. The room practically froze. Margaret was the first to react. She turned toward Derek. "You told me everything was legal." Derek's face went pale. Lauren's crying grew louder. For the first time that evening, she was truly afraid. Not because she was embarrassed, because she understood the consequences. Richard tried to speak. "Hannah," but she raised her hand and stopped him. No more explanations. No more imaginary futures. No more promises that everything would somehow be fixed. She had heard those promises too many times, and not once had they become reality. Susan sobbed openly. "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." Hannah looked at the woman sitting across from her. the woman who had given birth to her, the woman who had once made her feel safer than anyone else in the world. Then she remembered the hospital room, the empty chair beside her bed, the operating room doors closing, the silence, the loneliness, the pain. Those memories answered for her. Richard pushed the pen toward her one last time. "Just sign it." Hannah looked down at the document, then at her father, and finally, she spoke a single word. No. Just one word. Not long, not loud, but powerful enough to end everything. 6 months later, the investigation was complete. Part of Lauren and Derek's assets had to be sold to satisfy their financial obligations. Margaret no longer appeared in any family photographs. Susan and Richard were forced to scale back their lifestyle. And Hannah? She completed her final round of treatment at the beginning of spring. The day she walked out of the hospital, she stood beneath the sunlight for a long time. She took a deep breath. For the first time in years, she felt at peace. Not because she had won, not because she had taken revenge, but because she had finally stopped trying to earn love from people who had never truly valued her. Sometimes karma is not watching other people fall apart. Sometimes karma is simply watching them live with the choices they made, and being free to move forward yourself. If you were Hannah, after everything that happened, would you forgive your family or walk away forever? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy emotional family stories, hidden secrets, and those unforgettable moments when karma arrives at exactly the right time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more powerful stories.